All right. Our next presentation, monorepos and modularization. Everybody give it up for Jonathan Eskew.
So today I'm talking about monorepos and modularization. This is a tool that I've used a lot in other languages. It's just now kind of getting a lot of the tooling support that we'd like to see in Node, and it's making some pretty cool headways. So what is the point of modularization? Like when you're writing a program, one thing that you want to do is always make sure, if possible, to follow the Unix philosophy, which is write programs that do one thing, they do it well, they're focused, and write them to work together. So that was the original philosophy behind Unix. That was from the guy who invented the Unix pipe, and it's what made the tools that they wrote last from the 80s to still be in use today. So Node and NPM, like more so than other language communities, embrace this philosophy from the beginning. Like NPM has always had a bunch of tiny modules that do one thing well. When I started programming, I was mostly a PHP programmer, and they had several competing dependency management solutions that mostly consisted around downloading a single zip file, loading it at runtime. And what that made nearly impossible was installing transitive dependencies, which is something NPM has tackled from the beginning. And that really encouraged the emergence of bulky frameworks and all-in-one solutions. So Node's embrace of of small solutions was a nice change. So if you are developing a single module, it's pretty clear, what your path forward is. You take your code, you write it in a single repository, and you just publish it to GitHub. That approach, however, can come with some problems if you want to write more than two things that work together. So when you're publishing module code, like you can publish multiple GitHub repositories, but that often makes it difficult to coordinate releases. So if you're publishing two or more related modules or two modules that depend on a shared module, you can't keep the code in sync. You can't test changes that publish. You can't test the changes in one before pushing or publishing, and that can cause a couple of issues. So a solution that has emerged is to use something called a monorepo. So instead of separating your code into repositories that map to the modules, what you instead do is break down your code into bundles of packages and deploy repositories containing multiple modules to source control. So this has been a tested way of doing things at Google, at Facebook. It makes it easier to distribute the code to developers, particularly people who need to make changes to multiple services, multiple modules at the same time, or as part of the same release. It also makes your code a lot easier to find for other developers because they can use grep instead of Google's built-in search. And big thing for me, because I spend a lot of my time answering issues on GitHub, is that it makes open source much easier to support. Because if you are publishing 100 libraries, the last thing you want is 100 separate issue queues where people go to and you have to tell them, I'm sorry, you asked at the wrong place, please ask over here, where you then go and answer the question for them. So there are a few popular tools. Bazel is a big one that lets you mix Java, C++, and mobile projects. Sort of the big contender right now in JavaScript is Lerna. And they have a dragon for their logo, which is pretty cool. What this does is it is pretty simple. You just take a folder structure and say this corresponds to my module structure. And it manages publishing to NPM, committing on GitHub, and the versioning of your modules so you can maintain semantic versioning. Sort of the big strong suit of Lerna is that it will link your dependencies together so that you can factor out a shared core from dependencies without needing to rearrange your repositories. Yep, and that is the tooling for mono repositories. Thank you.